Good afternoon. We're very excited here to present to the Hudl conference and discuss something that's near and dear to our hearts. Injury prevention as a therapist for over 35 years is something we try and usually prevent from coming into our clinics. And when we do see injuries, especially ones that we know are preventable, we try and go back to the source and work with our communities and work with the coaches and trainers that are seeing our athletes and be able to help them in preventing a lot of these injuries. We know that a lot of injuries can be prevented, but not all sporting injuries can be prevented. I'm joined by my colleague, Trent Rencon, who's the director of the Fisher Institute, which is a division of Spooner Physical Therapy. Trent has been seeing professional athletes for nearly 20 years. Trent, thanks for joining us here today.
Excited to be here.
And we look forward to just having a conversation about injury prevention and really focusing on warm-up and recovery as it relates to injury prevention. But first of all, Trent, what does injury prevention mean to you as a treating clinician?
You know, injury prevention is an interesting discussion because, like you and I talk about all the time, prevention is kind of an interesting word. When you play sports, prevention is almost somewhat of an impossibility.
Right.
So how can we make our athletes more resilient to some of the things that they might incur in whatever their sport may be?
What do you mean by that resilience? What does it mean for a body to become resilient to injury or resilient to stress?
Yeah, great question. It's allowing the body to deal with the forces and the challenges that they're going to incur. For example, football happens to be a pretty popular topic. That's why we're here today. With most of our coaches and athletes listening in and people that are training football players, a very contact appropriate sport unless you happen to play flag. Injuries are going to happen whenever you put the human body with some force and some impact. The challenges that are going to incur are pretty great when the desire of the person doing the force is in a lot of ways trying to hurt that person. So we talk about resiliency and how can I absorb force, change of direction, speed and dynamics. How can I absorb that the best? And how can I create a body that moves well and that can tolerate that amount of challenge again and again and again?
So if I'm a high school coach in a area and I need to develop an off-season program, what are some key items that you'd want to see in that program to help that athlete know, number one, know that they can absorb that stress and create that resiliency?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first and foremost, and you spoke to it in our introduction, is developing a team within your community. And every community is different, right? We have a big community here in Phoenix.
Correct.
So you have a lot of places to pull from. We're lucky to have some pretty impressive performance clinics. We think we're one of those.
Right.
And so we get pulled in multiple directions to be a part of these things. But not everybody has those resources. So one, finding who those people are in your community, whether it's physical therapy clinics, whether it's training staffs, whether it's a local gym that may have a coach that is aware of some of these opportunities to train, to develop this resiliency, and then to help your athletes understand what that means and how they can recover afterwards. Finding those people in your community is going to be game changer for any program, no matter what level of experience or athlete that you have.
Yeah, and one of the things that, you and I talked about this with the Hudl Blitz is that we're creating a community here online for people. We're only a phone call away. Resources are only a phone call away or a Google click away for anyone to really have access to some of that latest and most up-to-date information, which is great.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is, right, is there's so many questions now. We're in an age where information is not hard to come from. This Google thing and YouTube thing has changed the world when it comes to information. So there's a lot of things out there. Yeah. I find that our job now is to help people understand what all this information is, where to put it in the sequence, So each of us can now have the optimal amount of opportunity to do that. If I go grab golf tips from Tiger Woods, that's wonderful, but I don't swing like Tiger Woods. I don't throw a football like Andrew Luck. So I need to do some things before that to develop my body before I try and take some of these things. And so that can be our job, is to try and help that information placement along the way.
You make a good case here for how to navigate the Google doctor, right? The person who's using Google, and realize that each athlete in front of us has its own individual characteristics, and they need to be evaluated and really treated and trained appropriately individually.
Right.
Let's shift to warm up. In general terms, what's the purpose of a warm up?
Right. I mean, people would say, well, a cheetah doesn't warm up. Why should I? As a human being, you know, that's the cliche that a lot of our young athletes tend to side to, because when you're young, warm up kind of seems like a waste of time. You get to our age, warm up is the most important thing we're going to do in the day before we do activities.
True.
But we would both sit here and say, if I had concentrated on what a proper warm up looked like maybe earlier on in my career at any capacity, my abilities might have been greater and my accomplishments may have been greater because of what I may have been able to do because of that. So to break it down, a warm-up is 10 minutes. And this is the very individual part of the warm-up, not looking at least from my opinion, not looking at the team warm-up. The team warm-up is something
speaking individually. Yes. You as a defensive back or a starting pitcher are going to get into your warm-up.
Right. So I know the team warm-up is at this time. Before game time. Those aren't things that I'm going to rely upon to get myself warm. That's part of the team community, the family that I'm working on, and just developing some continuity and preparation for the game. But my individual warm-up as a cornerback is going to look very different, and I'm going to be unique in how I approach my particular warm-up, because I need certain things that I know what those are, and then I've worked with a said professional to develop. So for me, back to that, 10 minutes. What can I do in 10 minutes to get ready? Well, I need to start at least to begin to sweat. That's the first thing for me. And that starts on a simple piece of cardio equipment. 3 to 5 minutes, a bike, a jump rope, jumping jacks, simple single plane motion movements that I can just get my body started to go.
Okay.
You're already halfway into it. And then for me, it's a simple squat or a lunge or my hands on the ground. I'm going to crawl. If I'm a lifting type of individual, I love to get in the gym. I might go and I might do some deadlift. That feels comfortable to me. If I'm a play high type of guy, high energy, high explosion, I might do some bouncing things that look like walking on my toes and holding some weights, or I'm going to do some small box jumps in multiple directions. Those things that allow my body to really get ready for the activity. I play cornerback. I need to be able to backpedal. I might work on some things that get my body going backwards, getting my eyes and getting my brain ready for that kind of activity.
Gotcha. And we know that any athlete has to move in all three planes and get their entire body warmed up, even if it is a relatively straight plane activity. Do you recommend that they go through a triplanar warm up as well?
Sure. And I think to break down what triplane moves, because that may not be common knowledge to everybody, is that when I run straight forward and straight back, we know that is sagittal plane, and that's something that I do all the time. So forward and backward is pretty easy. Laterally, also pretty easy, and something that most people will probably go and do. So I'm going to do something forward, I'm going to do something sideways, and then I'm going to do something that rotates my body.
Okay.
Whatever that might look like. If it's simple standing and my feet go one way and my body goes the other way, and then I go the opposite while jumping, great. If it's something where I can move my hips, what was the quarterback that used to do the funky hip rotation that he would go back and twist? He'd go back and twist. Those preparatory activities are just as important to get my body used to spinning. Football is a very dynamic, very high energy sport that goes in every single direction possible, both intentionally and, in our world, unintentionally. The
Gotcha.
unintentional parts of it are what we're trying to really prepare the athlete for.
Gotcha.
Intentionally, football is just track if I know where it's all going. But now that I put someone else doing their track match against me, I don't know what's going to happen. How do I train for something that I don't know it's going to happen? That's where resiliency comes in.
Got it. And I know in the context of everyday patients and people we see and parents coming to us, everyone sees something on Google or on the latest Amazon of a new device. Here's a new device. We've got, should I put heat on before I warm up? Should I use a percussive device? What is your opinion on use of these activities, and are they good or bad?
Yeah, I think, sky's the limit.
Okay.
How much fun could you have? We've been using electricity for eons, right? How can I put little pads on you? And, those things are out there, and they're rebranding those all the time for warm up, for injury prevention, for recovery. If you have opportunities and you have a budget for some of these things, especially on a personal level, I spend time a lot trying to help my athletes develop their own little preparatory and recovery backpack. What little toys can you put in that backpack? If it's a ball, if it's a band, a percussive device, like a Jaku or a Theragun, or a vibrating foam roll.
Yep.
There's all sorts of different cool toys out there that do pretty cool things. We know vibration is super powerful when it comes to the body. It's the reason why we get barefoot and get on the ground. Vibration is something that we really inherently grab onto. And it does wonders for our soft tissue, especially in the warm-up phase where I can spend 30 seconds on an area and really increase the blood flow and the heat to an area. So if I want to take a hot pack or a warm shower and then do some of that percussion device where I can put it on a body part or my whole body for a few minutes, I love it.
Gotcha. And, athletes these days are training year round.
Yeah.
What's the difference, would you say, between an off-season warm-up and possibly an in-season warm-up? Do they vary differ in your mind, or are they focused on different things?
Yeah, I think that they do. Like everything else, in-season and off-season, for obvious reasons, other than even just the word themselves, in-season, you're preparing for an event. You're going to prepare your body for the event that's upcoming. Those things are things that I'm not going to spend any time working on. The off season is when I'm going to work on some of the challenges that I'm trying to get better at. Maybe I want to be able to squat better. Maybe I want to change direction more effectively. I have been told that my ankles are tight or that my hips don't move like they want to. So I might spend time in that area trying to really move better, change direction better, get my ankles to move better. Gotcha. So those things are now going to be part of my warm up to do that.
Okay. And, we're speaking to coaches here and trainers in all demographics and areas of the country that are trying to develop their athletes to be the best they can be. And, as we look at, injury prevention, we know that, as you mentioned, that we have to look at the team approach as well. Performance coaches are very good at performance coaching, and the athletic trainers really help us as well. And the coach obviously has to develop the game plan and put together the practices and things of that nature. Where does a rehab professional come into that, and where can we really help in that injury prevention? I'm thinking kind of specifically if there's an off season or a post season time where we evaluate people and we see different injuries or things that have happened to those individuals. How do you work with a team and the coaches and stuff to help that athlete regain those resources, if you will, in order to continue rehabbing and training?
Yeah. So for us, living in the rehabilitation world and coming from helping people that are injured literally right now before doing this, I think there's graduated locations of every person's body.
Okay.
After a season's over or after a game's over, it's all about how can I get ready for what's going to happen next. In an off-season situation, after the season's over, we do what we call a healthy screen.
Okay.
You know, they want to come into our they're going to come into our clinic and they're going to get ready to do their off-season training and conditioning program for a set number of months. But I want to know what their body's left with. We want to know what little nicks and dings and small things that have bad patterns of motion and movement have come up. So we'll put them through what we call our 10-point screen, where we get them squatting and lunging, you know, and using the eyes that we have that are developed as experts, we feel like, in our field, knowing what people look like, what they move like. We spend thousands of dollars of our education on trying to learn these things and then impart these to our athletes and our clients on what deficiencies can we see that we can help you improve on that will make you, again, more resilient, that we can now tailor your strength program to, we can tailor your warm up to, we can tailor your recovery to, on just a small little few tweaks to whatever that may be.
And you mentioned this to me earlier, but you know that if we don't do those things, that if we place undue loads on that athlete while they're trying to train, that's when injuries can occur.
Yeah.
And for us, the injuries that occur when we're trying to train, those are the most preventable. And so we're trying to eliminate those. You mentioned you're kind of going into the off season. Let's shift our talk now to recovery. I don't know if there's a more hot topic right now in the field of sports medicine as recovery. What does recovery mean to you?
Well, that's a broad question. Like you said, hot topic. Everyone's talking about it. Everybody's selling it. You're starting to see recovery facilities pop up all over the place.
Correct.
We just hung out at one last week, and they're pretty awesome. And you can spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in these areas just on how do I recover.
Not to mention some of those high-end athletes that literally spend millions of dollars on recovery in their body every year.
Which is cool to see now that we're starting to hear more and more about the Tom Brady's and the Russell Wilsons and the LeBron James and how much attention they put, and by attention, I mean dollar figures, put into this particular area of their body and the importance of this ability to stay resilient, to continue to do the things that they do at the highest levels for a long period of time.
Right.
And in a very superficial world, that long period of time equals dollar figures.
But let's be real, we all don't have the resources of those individuals. So
Unfortunately not.
Let's take it down to the high school athlete.
Yeah.
We need to focus on a few things in recovery. What do you start with?
Yeah, it kind of depends on what your budget is, but for me, I keep it simple. You know, how do I downregulate the body's system as quickly and effectively as possible? That can look like a lot of different things. Cold is somewhat controversial right now. Should I do cold? Should I not do cold? I think there are places for it. Like everything else, I think living on the extremes can be challenging. I know that for me and for the athletes that we spend time with, a couple hours after an injury or not after an injury, but after a game or after an event, after a workout, getting into something cold allows the body not only to downregulate neurologically, but it allows the body to start that recovery process more effectively because you've sped up that recovery process of the body, of the venous return, that blood flow that you've just put a whole bunch of breakdown muscle, tissue, everything that's in there, nutrients that have to go back to the heart. You can expedite that process greatly by hopping into something cold and allow that process to happen.
Gotcha. Now let's look at the 24/7 cycle. And, you know, how do you tell some of your young athletes, your college athletes, that you got to sleep, you got to rest?
Yeah.
You know, where do you go there, and what are your recommendations?
To me, nothing more important.
Really?
It's the simplest and the hardest thing to do, in my opinion. I think because it is so simple, it can't be that easy. And yet we've got so much research now. We've got a wonderful guy out of Stanford that's doing research on the brain and the recovery process that it actually incurs. And we're starting to see scary types of information, especially when it comes to injury prediction models. We've been trying to find that for my whole career, and I know your whole career.
Yep.
How can I predict injury? We know that sleep is a prediction model. And if you're getting under 8 hours, that causation and that injury occurrence starts to increase exponentially by the 30 minutes of sleep that you're not getting every day.
So we've got to get sleep.
Yes.
Got to get sleep.
The best athletes in the world prioritize this better than anything else. And spending thousands of dollars on the environment they sleep in. When do they shut off their phone and their TV and the devices and the sounds that they're around? Where we've got things where you're putting things on your head, putting information that are innocuous sounds to allow your brain to get into certain wavelengths to downregulate so your body can recover at an optimal level. I mean, we want to go deep dive on recovery. Starting at sleep is the simplest and the coolest, and yet it's the least done because it's so simple.
Yeah, and what you're saying is it's not important enough just to get sleep. You want to be consistent with that pattern.
Yeah.
So it's not 8 hours from midnight to 8, and then the next day from 10 to 4. I mean, it's got to be something consistent for that body. And we know I've got 4 teenagers that play a lot of video games. They are hyper stimulated, and our athletes are competitive. They play video games and stuff all the time as well.
Yeah.
How does that relate into shutting down the brain and being able to relax?
Yeah, it doesn't.
To
be honest. You know, I try and set a rule for my athletes of 30 minutes. That's probably very nice of a rule. I think most people would say at least an hour, if not greater, prior to the world that we live in. That's not always realistic. And so you try and find, again, some balance on when I can shut the device off, when can I get it away from my body? And we can go deep dive on the EMF, waves that your phone creates, not just from, the visual stimulation that you're getting, what the brain's having to deal with. But 30 minutes is my gold standard of if I can just get that. Your homework, your computer, your laptop, your TV, your phone, whatever that looks like.
Any type of screen device.
Any device, 30 minutes prior to going to sleep, let your body get ready. And like you said, the consistency of my bedtime, back to the days when your parents are telling you when to go to bed, that's just as important then as it is now. My bedtime is 10:30, which means that's going to allow me till 6:30 to get the hours that I need to recover properly, to do high level events without having the risk of injury like I would if I did not get as much sleep.
Now you mentioned in warm up of turning on the nervous system or the neurological system. In recovery, what are we trying to do to the neurological system there?
Yeah, so just the same way that we upregulated the system to prepare our bodies for activity, jumping into, for those of you that are nerds, the sympathetic state of our brains. The recovery is all about parasympathetic. It's how can I get my body calm, cool, and collected so the systems of my body that are about building muscle, are about breaking down the nutrients and the food that I just put in it, that are about the systems of my heart and my kidneys and my liver to process all the junk that I just created from the activity that I did, because I have breakdown of every single thing in my body. The small little injury that I may have incurred, it has now got extra blood flow and extra oxygen being asked to go to that area to help it recover. The better chances that I can bring everything down and allow the system to do its job is going to allow for a more optimal recovery in whatever capacity that looks like.
Great. Thank you. And again, just to kind of bring off some of those new tools and things that are out there, are there certain things that can help you get into that parasympathetic state easier?
Sure. I mean, back to vibration again, it's a great tool to utilize that. We just won't use it we'll use it for longer times. In preparation, we like anywhere from 30 to 45 seconds in an area. With a recovery position, we can say, 2 to 3 minutes in a particular area is going to allow that muscle to calm down, to not be as tense, to try and bring some relaxation is a word that we like to use a lot of times. Even in our young athletes, relaxation is pretty important. And how can I bring that nervous system back to some calmness? Can you use heat? For sure. We like heat and cold. That contrast sometimes is kind of a cool thing for the body. If I can't really tolerate, say, the cold, or I don't like the cold, or I'm in the cold too much because I live in Minnesota right now, that maybe that's something I'm really going to go do. So if I can mix and match hot and cold, 2 minutes cold, 1 minute hot, and go like that for 15 minutes, that's going to allow some fluctuation in my body to actually calm the nervous system down. We can go even into some crazier areas of learning to breathe. There's certain things out there now that you can go find on patterns of breath, using slower breathing patterns, breath holds that can now put your mind and your body in a state of recovery, actually like that. That stuff is crazy cool. We think sleep is easy. Now put breathing out there, something that we just sat here and did for 30 minutes.
I'm guessing we need to do both of those things to live anyway.
We kind of do, you know, oxygen and rest are two things that are pretty much staples in our life, not to mention water and nutrition. But with those, you know, two of the four we just talked about in an athletic environment, those things couldn't be bigger for us.
Gotcha. We wanted to open it up to the group to see if there's any questions out there of folks that would like to ask myself or Trent on injury prevention, you know, ideas or comments that we've brought up, and be able to answer your question directly. We both know that we could speak on this topic for the next 2 days, but what's more important is building the community of sports medicine professionals and resources and places for people to get information that they can use to help their athletes and be the best they can be in their location. So
I think that's helpful too, Tim, is that not only do you become part of your community by bringing people into the fold per se that help your team out, but it also takes things off your plate if you're the coach and the strength coach and the athletic trainer. If you're in a small community, sure. How can I find people that can come in that can take some of these things off my plate? This is their skill set. How can I involve them more in the process and allow myself some more time management? So even my coach as a recovery process, that's important for us. That coach needs the ability to recover too as well. So you can have the best opportunity to relate to his athletes as best as possible. That community relationship is something that we spend a lot of time on doing. I mean, sometimes we call that marketing. I think community relationships is a much better term for that, because I'm not trying to sell you anything, but if I can help you and help you understand information, even if it's just sitting down and grabbing a cup of coffee or grabbing a lunch, right, and just saying, hey, what are the best things that I can do for my athletes that maybe you have some skill sets in, or that you have some understanding in? You know, it's a parent or a father that can lend some opportunities there, or a mom, right, that has some capabilities in that situation. Those are things that we really spend a lot of time, even in our big Phoenix community, that still is applicable to any area we go.
And I agree. And as long as at the heart of it is trying to help that athlete, and everybody is focused on that, then you're building relationships and trust amongst other folks that quite frankly have different skill sets and expertise than I do.
Right.
So for me, working with performance coaches and realizing how much they help the athlete, but how well we work together, I think is a critical thing.
Sure.
I'm just thinking of the coaches that, you know, that may be in smaller entities where they may not have access to all this, but to realize that through some organization and making connections that they can certainly have access to, you know, world-class providers and sports performance coaches.
Yeah. I know one thing that we want to talk about, because I don't see any questions popping up yet.
I don't either.
But are the specific movements that we feel that are super important for our athletes. I know we talked about in our preparation for this, you know, there are two big movements that I spend a lot of time either in preparation, especially off-season preparation, but even during season 2 as well, both on the warm-up and even in the recovery phase. And I think we can sit here and discuss that. Maybe that might stimulate some questions too as well. But, you know, I know for me, being able to squat properly is huge. And it relates to so many parts of every athlete's life, whether it's in the gym or it's on the field or on the court. That learning to squat properly and at full range of motion is one of the biggest things that we can do. We learn it when we're kids. We all play squatting on the ground, and yet as we get adults, we spend way too much time on these things that call chairs and don't move like we're supposed to, and we lose it.
Right. What specifically do we lose, and what should people be looking for when they're watching a squat?
Yeah, movement, and at my ankles, at my knees, and at my hips. Yes, there's relations to my spine, both on my low back and in my mid back, that are compensation patterns too as well. But I think you and I would argue that we would spend as much time on the ankles and on the hips, as it relates to where the knees go, over anything else to begin with. Yes, right. Every individual is unique, and we're going to take a look at each person uniquely. But if we're talking to a mass amount of people here, those people, I'm looking at ankles and hips, and those things need to be mobile enough to allow me to get into those super important positions.
Well, and it's a true fundamental building block, not only for strength and injury prevention, but it's almost a ready position for most sports.
Yes.
For playing defense, for getting ready, for you name it. The squat position is usually one you start in, and everyone thinks of a squat as having feet equal apart, but you can do a squat with one foot in front of the other, or the other foot, or wide or narrow. There's varying squats also that help challenge the body and expose some of the things that the resources it may not have as well.
Right. So not only just how can I get my, forgive the expression, but ass to grass, yep, so to speak, but as a preparatory or as a movement basis, can I put my body in different positions and then try and get through a squat? Correct. My body loves that because it gives me new information in places that I may not ever go, but I'm going to go there on the football field. Every athlete will attest to that, right? I go in positions that I didn't know I was capable of. And if I can build some of that resiliency into your system, both neurologically and joint ligamentous as well, you're going to have a tolerance to some of those extremes on a much higher level.
You got it. What's the second move?
I'm a lunge. I think lunging is right there with the squat. It's basically a single leg squat or movement, and I can take it forward, I can take it side, I can take it rotationally. It not only gives me a lot of information on the athlete and how they move, but it also allows you to build some single leg preparedness and strength depending on how you're trying to build that into your system. I know we spend a lot of time watching people lunge in multiple directions, right, that as either a rehab goal or a process of understanding. In any kind of environment, whether you're a football player, basketball player, a baseball player, the lunge is super important for us.
Gotcha. First question kind of coming in is how much water per day do you recommend?
Athletes, again, it can be personal. I think if you take whatever the athlete weighs in ounces, that's how much water you should be baseline drinking every single day. 200 pounds,
yep,
you get 200 ounces.
Wow.
It's a nice, simple,
the greater the size, the more you should be drinking.
Yep. If I got my 110, pound gymnastic girl, I don't need her drinking 200 ounces of water.
Yeah.
Lord help me, she wouldn't go to school. She'd be in the bathroom the whole day.
Right.
So again, there are variances within that number.
Give me the science of why that's so important for that size and why size matters on that.
Right. Because my body, both muscle, both brain, both systemically speaking, are so important when it comes to water. It's one of our building blocks. We know the body is approximately 70% water. Our brains, our soft tissues are all made up of it. It's the number one thing that all of our fitness people spend time on. We need that ultimately in our systems. I cannot say, most of us know we live in Arizona. Water is a big deal to us because we live in that heat and that dry heat that we all joke about, but water is such a big deal. I co-importance that though with not only is it just about water, but it's about understanding what hydration is. And that's not just water, but understanding what electrolyte and mineral balance is in that too as well, because you can overhydrate and flush your system of those important micronutrients that are sodium, potassium, magnesium, that are super important into muscle function. And if I just do water and my nutrient balance is off because I don't eat properly or I don't specifically hydrate correctly, then I'm going to have some other issues too as well, even though I think I'm hydrating because I'm just drinking tons and tons of water.
Gotcha. Is chocolate milk good?
Chocolate milk, it's a popular recovery tool out there in the literature. It's a popular recovery tool in a a lot of different high schools and colleges.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge with anything like this is that there are balances within this.
Okay.
Chocolate milk is cheap, easy to come by, and it has the basic micronutrients, protein, fat, carbohydrate, that post-workout can be pretty important. For me, it's what are my choices? If I have a better choice than chocolate milk, I'm gonna look at that. If I have a chocolate milk or a performance workout drink that's designed to be post-workout, I'm gonna go for that performance workout. I'm careful at putting dairy in my system. Not everybody's body can assimilate dairy correctly, and it can cause some other problems, GI, gastrointestinal wise, that can be issues for some people. So I'm careful with that. But it can be used as a post-recovery, especially in high school kids that deal with sugar.
It's a low-cost alternative.
It's a low-cost alternative that is there, that is something that is a capable alternative where it has the nice balance of carbohydrates, fats, some protein, but not a lot. Post-workout, I think the overabundance of protein is overemphasized. Post-workout, it's all about getting your glycogen, your sugar storage, your carbohydrate storage back up. It's an energy source. 2 hours later, that's where I need my quality protein, my balanced fat, carbohydrate, recovery, nutrition in. But that immediate one, 10, 15, maybe close to 20 if I'm a big guy, grams of protein is really all I need. That big 40, 50 gram thing, outside of that is not necessary in most athletes.
Question coming. I'm a huge proponent of breathing as a therapeutic modality. Do you cue breathing during lifting? If so, how do you?
I mean, this person is speaking my language.
Okay.
I'm a big breathing fan, and I think it's super important depending on your area. You mentioned lifting in the question. Yeah, we could spend another 2 days on this topic as well if you wanted to take a deep dive on breathing and its importance. It's usually one of those things. Okay, inhale, on the concentric, and you're going to exhale on the eccentric, or vice versa. I'm spending a lot of time with my athletes, and if I can, in working on just breathing through my nose. It allows me a controlled environment. It doesn't let my athletes go too fast if I don't need them to yet. And back to talking about recovery, the better and sooner I can get you breathing through your nose, that recovery process happens quicker. So yes, breathing, super important. There's growing information out there. There's some quality people that are writing and talking a lot about breath work. It sounds somewhat hokey sometimes because breathing can be weird, and not to offend anybody at all, but it used to be something that was just kind of centered in the yoga community a lot. Hey, they beat us to the punch.
That stuff that's been around for 5,000 years probably has some benefit. It's funny, you're coming back to very natural things. Yeah. Breathing, sleep and rest. There was a third one in there.
Nutrition.
Basic nutrition.
Yeah.
Ice. The natural elements as really core pieces of being part of prevention.
Yeah.
And we know that there's a lot of very state-of-the-art fancy exercise or fancy things, but you can get by with very minimalistic stuff and still have great outcomes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we're seeing a lot of the experts that speak on these things, that write the books on these things, they're all teaching us this return to Mother Earth, to Mother Nature, so to speak, on a lot of these activities. And it's the new groundbreaking science that we're relearning that, hey, this is where we come from. This is still very, very important, and our body still needs this. And now, because we're out of it so much now,
right?
I think that's why that return is coming back to that. Yeah. That's why breathing is getting much more emphasis. That's why hot and cold and those actual elemental components bring so much to our bodies in a recovery sense that it's just finding a way to relate that to the individual and to the athlete in a way that they can understand and know the importance of it. If I just tell you to go do a lot of these crazy, weird things or super expensive things, most athletes are going to be like, I'm not going to do it, especially at a high school age. That's a tough age. But if I can find some ways to help them understand why this is important, if I get one or two things out, if I get them to sleep 8 hours on a consistent basis, I've won.
Yeah.
And I can work on some of the other things as they start to grow and develop and understand my maturity level.
You mentioned that high school athlete and they like to go and maybe, sometimes overload the system or overtrain. How many rest days do you try and work in, or what do the rest days or workload requirements look like? And again, I think this kind of comes into how we work with the team, because the coach is going to put a load on them during practice. The strength coach is going to be doing some things on them. And if we're doing some rehab possible things, that's also a load. How do we know how much we're loading and when we're starting to push the limits of that?
Yeah. Again,
there's 4 questions in there.
There's
Sorry.
a lot. There's a lot built into that question. Load management is a term that we talk about when it comes to the NBA, right? It's something that a lot of these bigger stars are trying to help their bodies recover more efficiently. We live in Arizona. We can play one sport for 13 months out of the year, and just go and not stop. And we see that in our high school age athletes a lot, where they're spending time just doing one thing, and the development of that person actually isn't occurring because we're just really skilled, but as an athlete, we don't move well. We don't recover well. The resiliency.
And we're seeing injuries from that as well.
Oh, a ton. And this is where I love a lot of the work of Dr. Andrews.
Correct.
Who looking at it from a baseball instance, especially when shoulders and arms, and how much use is important there. But they're really just putting numbers to what we already know to be true.
Correct.
I have to find a balance in my athletes. This is just as important for the coaches and the staff as it is for the parents. And it really is about the parents and helping their kids understand what's going to go. Because most kids, especially athletes, are just going to go. You tell them
they want to play.
They're going to go.
Yeah.
But as a parent, you have a better and broader understanding of what's going on. Finding ways to build in active rest.
What does active rest look like on a rest day?
Yeah, exactly. Do something different. Active rest does not mean go lay on the couch. Our bodies don't respond well to rest other than sleep. That's the difference. Sleep is important, but rest is totally different. Shutting it down and spending a week on the couch is not what you and I talk about when we say take a week off. But that, unfortunately, is the perception a lot of times.
Gotcha.
So for our high school athletes, especially, playing a different sport for a couple months would be something that you and I would talk about as a rest, a break from high-level football. They're a decent soccer player. I can keep up a level of fitness, not deal with the impact on the same way, and let my body and my brain have some different inputs. That, in a lot of ways, is active rest.
Okay.
It's building in some of those things that allow your system a different capability. So now when I come back to it, in 3 months, because that's still my priority, I'm going to be that much better off because of my body's now had some ability to get away from something and then return to it.
So it's not just, again, rest isn't just no activity. Rest is a different activity, and finding something else that complements, doesn't double down on the stress you're putting on the system.
Right. Intensity is everything. And if I go at a 9 out of 10 every single day, we're going to see breakdown. It's a wonderful business model for us. So if that's what you choose to do, we'll be best friends.
Yeah.
But our business model also is to, how do I keep you out of my office?
Correct.
How do I push you in a direction that allows you the most success without having to come see me? That's the whole idea. And so that looks like building in active rest days into your training. If it's off season, I'm not in the gym going hard, going heavy every single day. I don't care what the t-shirt says. That's just not how this should happen. And the best in the world understand active rest better than anybody.
Yeah, great. Trent, thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom and in that with the coaches. And thank you to the Hudl Blitz for inviting us to speak, and for the sponsors. And we look forward to connecting with more of you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.